Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today we begin the official book study for the mystical Kabbalah. Been waiting for this for quite a while, and here it is. So we're going to start with the first three chapters. It's about 18 pages. And she's going to get into a little bit of the background of her philosophy, where she's coming from, setting the stage up. Dion Fortune is very thorough in her explanation, and I would probably say, even still, the Mystical Kabbalah is probably the best book that I've ever read on Kabbalah. I mean, I've read it multiple times since I first got it in 2015, and every single time I learned something new. So I'm super excited this time because I deliberately structured the book study this year to prepare for this. So what I mean is, I noticed that there were a lot of references to yoga. So there was a lot of study dealing with the Vedic information, the yoga information, Samkhya, right? And how it connects to the Hermetic philosophy. So after thoroughly going through some very important information in regards to yoga, in regards to Samkhya, and the Eastern tradition, I believe that at this point, if you have been reading along with me, you should be thoroughly prepared to dive into this text. So let's begin. I appreciate you guys for being here. I hope you're as excited as I am. I mean, who gets excited over a book, right? Smart people do. Because we know that books contain information, and the right information can unlock the right memories. And I don't just mean personal memories, I mean cosmic memory, collective unconscious. So I believe this is one of those books. You can be the judge for yourself. It depends on, where you're at in your journey and if your karma is even built for this kind of thing. But if you've been here with me for the past couple of months going through these books, then yeah, that includes you. So yeah, yeah. Hit the like button, right? Because we got half the likes according to how many people are actually here. So if you're here, if you're excited about this, if you're ready to dig in, if you already have this book, if you've got your highlighter ready, if you've already read it, go ahead and hit that like button, right? Because it helps the YouTube algorithm push my videos into the phones and screens of people who want to see them. And it's just a little tiny way of, giving some thanks, I suppose. So I think we should go ahead and jump right in. Pork Hill, peace, peace. Al Dickey, good evening. Court Singh, peace. James Gatabaki, bless up. Travis Harris, greetings, greetings. Vince Cashmere, years and years and years, my friend. I remember that time I talked to you and I was sitting on my front porch. I wonder if you remember that. That was like 2017. Naturally Natured, good evening. I hope that our conversation opened up something for you today, because it certainly got me thinking about a few things. Because a lot of stuff that I do is unconscious, and this is why I love being asked questions, because it helps me to shed light on some of the things that I didn't realize I know. But anyways, I hope that you know, your inner temple is being remodeled in a way that you see fit. Taste of Oxygen, peace. Living in the Zone, peace. I didn't stumble that time. Sunshine Chick, always great to see you. All right, all right. Alicia M, good evening, good evening. Nicole Berkeley, peace, peace. Good to see you. Amber D, sparkly, sparkly greetings. Christopher Ram Jatan, greetings, greetings. Mario 2502, peace. All right, so let's go through it. Let's get right into it. It's Monday. Color's purple. Moon Day. Yasad. Joyce Soul 633. Good evening. All right. All right. Coffee Mug says, I don't believe in humans. Human is a lie. There we go. There we go. Okay, so if you want to really understand how the universe is structured according to Qabalah and Samkhya, we're usually taught that things are external to us and we're, I don't know, floating on top of a giant rock, which in some angle I'm sure is true. But based off of everything that we learned, please understand that the model of the universe, the model of existence, can be interpreted in multiple ways, right? So what that means is it can be interpreted to look like this. It can also be interpreted to look like this. And it can also be interpreted to look like this. The more that I study and learn about Purusha and Prakriti, is that we've got, and this also goes for Kabbalah with the three negative veils. If you guys remember from A Practical Guide to Kabbalistic Symbolism, in the beginning, he actually quoted Dion Fortune when he talked about the negative veils of existence. And it should be on page 53 or so. He showed a little diagram, and that diagram kind of got me thinking. So you'll see in this diagram, these three negative veils, they kind of move in certain angles to each other, right? Horizontal, vertical, and lateral. And this, the motion, the spinning of, and this is all happening in blackness, by the way. There's not like cosmic rings out there. The motion of one creates the motion of the other, which creates the motion of the other. And all this swirling motion, this is where we get the prototype for the torus field. What's happening is that all of that motion is causing somewhat of a compression in the center. Now, none of this is tangible. All of this is extremely abstract. We can't really understand it with our human brains, but we can kind of get close. And this would represent the motion of the triple blackness of space. Notice how on this book, they have the trident at the top to symbolize the triple blackness of space. It's all about the symbolism, right? Even here, you've got Om, the three-letter word, resting above and beyond, right? So rest assured that none of this is an accident. Anyways, the motion of these three densities of nothing, negative existence, compresses a center. You can think of this as like an egg, right? A hard-boiled egg. The very center of a hard-boiled egg is a hard yolk, right? Well, that's kind of what's happening here. Now, that center point, we would know as Kether. Okay, we would also know that center point as Prakriti. Okay, so Purusha would represent the eternal ocean of everything and nothing, right? But in the very center of that eternal ocean is a tiny, tiny seed. And that tiny seed is the beginning of life as we know it. Now keep in mind, oh, nice. Greetings, Andy. New name or new profile picture. I remember you guys from the profile picture. I mean, I know you already, Andy, but still. Cedric, peace, bro, peace. Reina Leona, greetings, greetings. Okay, so that center that's being compressed can be seen as Kether. Okay, and it's within Kether, it's within Prakriti that manifestation happens. Don't worry, we're going to get right to it, but I just wanted to say this first because this is something that I didn't understand before, and I would like to express it here. Basically, you guys remember the book that we just did, Samkhya Darshan, talked about this hierarchy of manifestation. Purusha would represent the everything else and the nothing, right? It's undefinable. It is pure soul, and it contains within it, it's just ultimate consciousness. Everything, right? But it's nothing that we can cognize with our five senses. Okay, so because what happens is, like I said, just like with the triple blackness of space, that motion condenses a hard center. This motion is not actually anything. It's just potentiality. Now that hard center is a lot like an egg, right? Now all that compression of consciousness creates matter. It creates prakriti, right? As you can see here in the very center of this egg, I have Asaya. Also, we could say it was Malkuth. We could also say it was Prithvi, right? The most dense top, the earth element, right? And the whole reason that this came to me is because studying Samkhya Darshan, it would constantly talk about that when Purusha became close to Prakriti, whenever Prakriti got into the proximity of Purusha, she would begin to emulate and imitate Purusha. So I'm thinking to myself, when is she not near Purusha? Like, does she go away and come back? What's causing them to dance? Like, what is this relationship? And then it dawned on me after studying these books. Prakriti, or Kether, nature, existence, matter, the universe, it exists as one of the potentialities of infinity. Okay, so there's an infinite ocean of blackness, and one of the potentialities is this universe. And you'll see that here in this cover. Notice, this is a bunch of the Tree of Lives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? All stemming from a central point. This would be Kether. Oh, excuse me, that would be Malkuth. This is outside in. Now, what's actually happening here is that the more dense it gets, the further away it is from soul, from Purusha, it becomes hard, dead, lifeless, inert matter. That's at the very center. That's at the yolk of this egg, this cosmic egg, this Hiranyagarbha. Those of you who know what that word is, shout out to Tatwashuti. But anyways, furthest away from Purusha is this dense core, this center, Asaya, Malkuth, Prithvi. Now, closest to Purusha is Buddhi, right? You can think of this as like the earth, and how the earth has all these different atmospheres that extend out into space, right? Some of the atmospheres, they extend miles and miles and hundreds of miles into space. That's like the limit of the atmosphere of the earth. Well, Buddhi would kind of be like the limit of the atmosphere of Prakriti. Buddhi is the furthest outreach of Prakriti. So you can think of Prakriti almost like a planet, almost like planet Earth, with a luminous cloud of different degrees and variation of consciousness. Because what's happening is that Prakriti begins to reflect Purusha. So the first thing that she reflects is what we can call the higher self, her version of the soul. That's Buddhi. Buddhi is what Prakriti creates in response to existing, right? So as this mirrored reflection situation continues, what's happening is that as the reflection is continuing, it's becoming further away from Purusha. It's becoming more and more dense, more and more solid, right? It's like a bullseye. So the same thing that we learned that was happening here is that Kether, it's reflecting itself into Hakma. And that reflection, back and forth, eventually consciousness is infinite. So there's going to be infinite reflections. But at a slightly more dense level, those infinite reflections become solidified into forms, into potential forms. That's ahamkara, that's bina, right? Now that's the last level where things are there's a barrier here, right? There's a barrier. And what that represents is, we could even say, a purity of reflection of Purusha. Because past this point, the reflections now become extremely dense, and they cannot return to their original state without losing what they are completely, right? So that's where this abyss comes from. That's why what she'll say in this book is that you cannot cross Doth and come back. It's not because this is the secret dimension, but because once you cross that barrier, you realize that none of this was real like you thought it was. Sure, it's real. You experience it with your five senses, but none of this stuff is substantial outside. It's kind of like when I was in the Navy, and everybody had rank, like the chief and the petty officer, first class, second class, third class, and everybody's stomping around, ruling over their subordinates. I mean, it wasn't all bad, but some people had like that kind of attitude, like, They just ruled the world, and you had to do what they say. But that only worked in the military. You couldn't take that in the real world, right? In the real world, the civilian world, you couldn't stomp around and say, "Oh, I'm a master chief, I'm a chief, da da da." If people don't know what that is, they're not going to give you any respect. So, likewise, pretty much everything that's happening beneath Bina is like its own little universe of rules. But none of that shit applies outside. None of that applies. So all the little stuff that we think is important in our day-to-day lives, our ego, our attachment, our belongings, our relationships, our beliefs, our memories, all those different things, it's as if it holds rank in the material world, but it has zero rank past this barrier. Now, just to continue on, Buddhi becomes the first reflection. Ahamkara becomes the next reflection. And with each reflection, it becomes more and more dense because ego, or Om, this is the infinite level of Om, as Om becomes more dense, it has to select a particular manifestation, or we could even say a particular multiverse, universe, dimension, whatever. Whatever words are going to make your mouth water. The next level of density is the five senses, the Indriyas, the Karmendriyas, the Jnanendriyas. And then the densest level is what is actually observed by the five senses. Okay? Now, most people that exist in this planet are stuck here because this is all that they recognize and all that they choose to recognize. It's a very scary thing to expand somebody if that's not what they want to do, if that's not what they're built to do. It's not anybody's job to wake anybody up, right? But if you're privy to this information, then this is for you. I hope that there's a few of you guys who understand what I'm talking about right now. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started with the whole point of this thing. Chicken and macaroni. Okay. All right. So let's set this thing up. Nuru, peace, brother, peace. Pharaoh fades, peace and greetings. Say unique, exactly. We got those spirals going on. Alora, peace. Nuru, I believe I am due for a conversation with you, my friend. Okay. All right, here we are. Put this thing on vibrate. Hello. Okay. Just a sec. 777. It's kind of funny. I posted how I began to notice that more and more people are reading spiritual books on the YouTubes now. It's pretty nice when you start trends. But it's even better that people are getting this information and taking these books more seriously. Because look, in the past, people would just hold up the book cover and show off the books that they bought. At least now, people are, reading and showing and proving, that kind of deal. Whether it's for vanity or not, at least people are doing it. Okay. So, we will begin with the forward, go through chapter 1, Yoga of the West, chapter 2, the choice of path, and then finally chapter 3, the method of the Kabbalah. All right. Forward. The Tree of Life forms the ground plan of the Western esoteric tradition and is the system upon which pupils are trained in the Society of Inner Light. This volume and others are used as the basis of the tutorial system of the Society. Particulars of the Society will be sent to anyone who cares to write to the Society of Inner Light, 38 Steeles Road, London, NW3 4RG. The transliteration of Hebrew words into English is the subject of much diversity of opinion, every scholar appearing to have his own system. In these pages, I have availed myself of the alphabetical table given by MacGregor Mathers in the Kabbalah Unveiled, because this book is one generally used by esoteric students. He himself does not adhere to his own table systematically, however, and even uses different spellings for the same words. This is very confusing for anyone who wishes to use the geometric method of elucidation, in which letters are turned into numbers. When, therefore, Mathers gives alternative transliterations, I followed the one which coincides with that given in his own table. The capitalization employed in these pages may also appear unusual, but it is one traditionally used among students of Western esoteric tradition. In the system, common words such as earth or path are used in a technical sense to denote spiritual principles. When this is done, a capital is used to indicate the fact. When a capital is not used, it may be taken that the word is to be understood in its ordinary sense. As I have frequently referred to the authority of MacGregor Mathers and Aleister Crowley in matters of mysticism, it may be as well to explain my position in relation to these two writers. I was at one time a member of the organization founded by the former, but have never been associated with the latter, Aleister Crowley. I have never known either of these gentlemen personally, MacGregor Mathers having died before I joined his organization, and Aleister Crowley having then ceased to be associated with it. An interesting thing, if you're curious about the Golden Dawn, you can kind of see the timeline of MacGregor Mathers, Aleister Crowley, Israel Regardie, Dion Fortune, Gareth Knight, etc. You'll find that actually they all didn't appear and coincide at the same time. It's kind of a passing of the baton, so to speak. MacGregor Mathers and Aleister Crowley met, but Dion Fortune didn't meet them. Oh, and I can't forget also W.E. Butler. W.E. Butler and the author of Ladder of Lights, Mr. William G. Gray. All right, so here we go, part one. Raina Leona asks, is your book going to be on Amazon? Probably not the first one. I mean, sheesh. Michael Bell sold 400 copies of his book without Amazon. I may not need it. At least not yet. Okay. The Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune. Ashe to the Order of the Phoenix. Ashe to the Order of the Unicorn. Chapter 1. The Yoga of the West. Very few students of occultism know anything at all about the fountainhead whence their tradition springs. She pops it off, letting you know, because this is true even today. Very few students of occultism know anything at all about the fountainhead, the origin from where their tradition springs. You guys could be an exception to the rule. Many of them do not even know there is a Western tradition. Scholarship is baffled by the intentional blinds and defenses with which initiates, both ancient and modern, have wrapped themselves about, and concludes that the few fragments of literature which have come down to us are medieval forgeries. They would be greatly surprised if they knew that these fragments, supplemented by manuscripts that have never been allowed to pass out of the hands of initiates, and completed by an oral tradition, right, kind of like what we're doing here, are handed down in schools of initiation to this day and are used as the basis of the practical work of the yoga of the West. It says it right here in chapter 1. It says it right here in chapter 1. So there's no mistake about it. I'm not reaching. You see it for yourself. Yoga, 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 yoga. 2. The adepts of those races whose evolutionary destiny is to conquer the physical plane have evolved a yoga technique of their own, which is adapted to their special problems and peculiar needs. This technique is based upon the well-known but little understood Kabbalah, the wisdom of Israel. So look at what she's saying here. In this first section, she's saying that very few occultists, quote unquote, know anything about where their tradition even comes from, right? Typically it is passed down through oral tradition. And number 2, she's saying that the adepts of those races, right? So there's specific races, she's saying. The adepts of those races whose evolutionary destiny is to conquer the physical plane. There are races whose evolutionary destiny is to conquer the physical plane. Now, please expand your mind, because we're not talking about black people, white people, whatever, because those aren't races, right? Those aren't races. You'll have to look a little bit deeper. That denotes a caste system. The adepts of those races, right? And if you look at Blavatsky, she says that there were about 6 races or so, right? So we're talking about something bigger than what you're just going to pick up on Google. But there are masters of these races whose evolutionary destiny is to conquer the physical plane. And you can't conquer something if you don't understand it, right? They've evolved a yoga technique of their own, which is adapted to their special problems and their peculiar needs. And this technique is based upon the well-known, but little understood Kabbalah, the wisdom of Israel. Very few people understand this. 3. It may be asked why it is that the Western nations should go to the Hebrew culture for their mystical tradition. The answer to this question will be readily understood by those who are acquainted with the esoteric theory concerning races and sub-races. Everything must have a source. Cultures do not spring out of nothing. The seed bearers of each new phase of culture, right? The seed bearers of each new phase of culture must, of necessity, arise within the preceding culture. In other words, if culture is going to evolve, it doesn't just evolve out of nowhere. Let's say the evolution of culture, it has to start within the old culture, right? It's almost like a carcass that is dying, but the new birth is fertile inside of it, and it springs forward. So in other words, the people who write the future, they're alive today, working hard to make sure it happens, right? The seed bearers of each new phase of culture must, of necessity, arise within the preceding culture. No one can deny that Judaism was the matrix of the European spiritual culture when they recall the fact that Jesus and Paul were both Jews. No race except the Jewish race could possibly have served as the stock upon which the new dispensation was to be grafted, because no other race was monotheistic. So in other words, there wouldn't be a European Christianity if there wasn't Judaism, because obviously Jesus and Paul were both Jews. So they were the beginning of the next phase existing in the previous phase. I wonder where she's going with this. And she said that no race except the Jewish race could have been the basis for Christianity, because no other race was monotheistic at the time. Pantheism and polytheism had their day, and a new and more spiritual culture was due. The Christian races owe their religion to the Jewish culture, as surely the Buddhist races of the East owe theirs to the Hindu culture. And we learned that firsthand on the last book, because Buddhism was founded upon Samkhya, right? So the Buddhists, they had to have come out of Samkhya, because Samkhya was the big deal at the time, right? Likewise, what's going to happen tomorrow has to be born out of today. So don't be afraid of vaccine mandates and what's the word? Martial law and people wearing body suits and clones and all this other stuff you guys are worried about. Don't worry about that. Because all this stuff is the beginnings of tomorrow. And if it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't happen. The noisy creatures of earth. The mysticism of Israel supplies the foundation of modern Western occultism. It forms the theoretical basis upon which all ceremonial is developed. Its famous glyph, the Tree of Life, is the best meditation symbol we possess because it is the most comprehensive. Right? So it's not just a fancy symbol. There's a lot of depth to this thing, a lot of depth to it. I mean, even now you can see the Ida, the Pingala, like I said, the triple blackness of space, Doth, death, right? And even the Clipoth. And notice how it looks like a womb, a vagina, right? And look at the infinite fractal because it continues. But she said here, the best meditation symbol we possess because it is the most comprehensive. 5. It is not my intention to write a historical study of the sources of the Kabbalah, but rather to show the uses that are made of it by modern students of the mysteries. For although the roots of our system are in tradition, there is no reason why we should be hidebound by a tradition. A technique that is being actually practiced is a growing thing, for the experience of each enriches it and becomes part of the common heritage. Right? So, although the roots of our system are in tradition, right? The roots of this system is in tradition. There's no reason that you should be bound by tradition, right? A technique that is being actually practiced is a growing thing, right? That's why it's study and practice. Because a technique that is practiced, it's still evolving. It's evolving with the times. The fundamentals are the same, but the essence is the same, but the expression of it becomes modified. Even the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali talked about that. The basics, the essence is the same, but how it's expressed is different. And if you can't break free from tradition, then at some point you'll have to die with tradition. That's just the way it is. Oh yeah, some things will never change. You guys still with me? Sly, peace. Six, it is not necessarily incumbent upon us to do certain things or hold certain ideas because the rabbis who lived before Christ had certain views. The world has moved on since those days, and we are under a new dispensation. But what was true in principle then will be true in principle now, and of value to us. The modern Kabbalist is the heir of the ancient Kabbalist, but he must reinterpret doctrine and reformulate method in the light of the present dispensation if the heritage he has received is to be of any practical value to him. So in other words, the rabbis held a certain viewpoint, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that Christ had to hold the exact same viewpoint. One evolved out of the other. He said that the world has moved on since those days, and we're under a new dispensation, right? But, however, remember, it's not just, oh, it's a new world, we can do what we want, things are new. Not exactly that, right? Not exactly that. She says what is true in principle then will be true in principle now and of value to us. And see, that's the amazing thing. One of the things I learned about internet marketing is that a lot of people don't go very far because they're carried away by trends and fads, and new apps, new software, and they think that, oh, if I don't get in on the next big thing, I'm going to miss out. I'll never learn. I can't learn marketing because it keeps changing. The internet's changing. There's always a new social media and this and Google updates and that. And if you have that mindset, you stay stuck, right? If you believe that the world's changing so fast that you can't keep up, you're already setting yourself up for disaster. What I've come to learn from my favorite marketing mentor is that the fundamentals have been the same since before newspapers, right? The fundamentals have been the same for a very, very long time. Because while the medium may change, right? It was newspapers, then it was radio, then it was television. Now it's in the palm of your hand through different apps. And now you have to do things a different way, da da da. That's the expression. Of course, it's going to change. Duh. But the essence of that does not change because you're still communicating with human beings. And human beings only have a limited, small amount of desires and pains, right? Every human being that you will ever meet that has ever lived on this planet only has a very small selection of desires and pains. It's been broken down to a science. So it doesn't matter if this is a person that's herding cows, doesn't matter if this is a person who is, online. No matter what time frame you go to, human beings are the same fundamentally. And as long as you live fundamentally, you'll be able to adapt no matter what the outside is. So I learned I didn't have to keep up with the new trends and the new techniques and all that other shiny stuff. I just needed to learn the fundamentals. That's when I started making progress. So like what he's saying here, just because the old folks did it a certain way doesn't mean that you have to do it the same way today. But just remember, what was true in principle then will be true in principle now and of value to us. It's true and it's valuable. So again, the modern Kabbalist is the heir of the ancient Kabbalist, right? As a marketer on the internet, it would serve you responsibly to study marketers of the past, people who did mail order, people who advertised on television, right? Oh, I got a whole bookshelf of books on that very same subject. But he says here that, or she says here that you must reinterpret doctrine and reformulate method, right? So reinterpret the work. This very book right here is going to have to be reinterpreted for modern times. And she says reformulate the method. So even the rituals will have to be reformulated, as we're already seeing. There's a lot of components to a goetic ritual, but if you understand the fundamentals of what's actually happening, you don't have to have all those tools. All you need is a candle and a focused mind. 7. I do not claim that the modern Kabbalistic teachings, as I have learnt them, are identical with those of pre-Christian rabbis, but I claim that they are the legitimate descendants thereof and the natural development therefrom. The nearer the source, the purer the stream. That's a powerful quote right there, highlighted if you did not already. The nearer the source, the purer the stream. Just like what I was saying here, how Buddhi is the closest to Purusha. So the nearest to the source, the purer the stream. Although Buddhi is still an aspect of Prakriti, it is purified Prakriti. It is the most refined Prakriti because it's closer to the source. So if she says the nearer the source, the purer the stream, then that would mean the further the source, the more impure. So at the furthest from Purusha, we have the earth element, we have Prithvi, we have Malkuth, we have Asaya. Since they're the furthest from the source, they're the least pure. You feel me? Nehru says, consider the likeness of the words market and Malkut. These are analogs. He's on to me. Let me give my metaphors in peace, Nehru. Sly, thank you so much for your donation. I appreciate you. Happy birthday to ya. Pablo X69, wholeness, because we are all one, and compassion for self-tribe. I see you have expanded on your entrance. I like it. Get Smart Quick says, who's your favorite marketing guru? You'd have to watch my videos and catch me slipping one day. Let's continue. If you watch my old videos, you'll see his books all over my desk and table. They're the only books that are not magic books that I have in several pictures. The nearer the source, the purer the stream. In order to discover first principles, we must go to the fountain head. Remember what she said in verse 1. Very few occultists know about the fountainhead from which their tradition springs. So she says, in order to discover first principles, we must go to the fountainhead, right? This is the same reason why I've been digging deeper and deeper, just to get to the origin, just to get to the Vedic information, the yoga information. And for those of you who are Afrocentric and possibly stuck in Kemet, don't worry, because I'm open-minded. I'm recently looking into this one. Shout out to Alligator the Greater for bringing this to my attention. But who knows? Maybe we're continuing to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. But enough about that. Let's focus on this. Obirinji, peace. Will I be able to get through 3 chapters tonight? We'll see. I plan on going for like 3 hours, so until about 11 o'clock my time. So that's 2 more hours from now. The nearer the source, the purer the stream. In order to discover first principles, we must go to the fountainhead. But a river receives many tributaries in the course of its flow, and these need not necessarily be polluted. In other words, if you look at a river, you're going to notice that there's many different streams and tributaries that add to it or branch off from it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the river's polluted, right? If we want to discover whether they are pure or not, check this out. This is the key that you can use to tell what's legit and what's not. If we want to discover whether they are pure or not, we compare them with the pristine stream. And if they pass this test, they may well be permitted to mingle with the main body of waters and swell their strength. Keep in mind what's happening at the level of Doth, right? And how I mentioned most everything under Doth is not allowed to cross over, not because there's a gatekeeper saying, no, you shall not pass, but only purity can come through that gate, because only purity goes into that gate. So it is with the tradition. That which is not antagonistic will be assimilated. In other words, that which is harmonious will be assimilated. The same way that you can really work with anything as long as it makes sense. That which is not antagonistic will be assimilated. So that's a presupposition, right? And what we've learned from NLP is that a presupposition means that this phrase is loaded with assumptions. And the assumption here is that that which is antagonistic, right? Antagonist, that means it's against you. It's like an enemy. It's working against you. That which is antagonistic will not be assimilated. So think about your inner thoughts and your personality and your emotions. Are there aspects of yourself that work against you? Do you have thoughts and an inner voice and memories and beliefs that work against you? Because those are signs of falsehood, of unreality. We must always test the purity of a tradition by reference to first principles. But we shall equally judge of the vitality of a tradition by its power to assimilate, right? It is only a dead faith which remains uninfluenced by contemporary thought. So when she's talking about purity, she's not talking about following a set of rules perfectly like the people before you did. That's not what she meant by purity. That's dead, because people evolve and people change as far as culture goes. And the system, the software, it has to line up with the culture of the people at the time, or otherwise the tradition cannot be followed. Make sense? 9. The original stream of Hebraic mysticism has received many tributaries. We see its rise among the nomad worshippers of Chaldea, where Abraham, in his tent, among his flocks, hears the voice of God. But Abraham, or Brahma, depending on where you're coming from, but Abraham has a shadowy background in which vast forms move half seen. The mysterious figure of a great priest king, born without a father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, administers to him the first Eucharistic feast of bread and wine after the battle with the kings in the valley, the sinister kings of Edom, who ruled ere there was a king in Israel, whose kingdoms are unbalanced force. And if you don't know, that's a reference to the clip-off, right? The kings of Edom, who ruled evermore, ever since there was a king in Israel, whose kingdoms are unbalanced force. Number 10. Generation by generation, we trace the intercourse of the princes of Israel with the priest kings of Egypt. Abraham and Jacob went thither. Joseph and Moses were intimately associated with the court of the royal adepts. When we read of Solomon sending to Hiram, king of Tyre, for men and materials to aid in the building of the temple, we know that the famous Tyrian mysteries must have profoundly influenced the Hebrew esotericism. When we read of Daniel being educated in the palaces of Babylon, we know that the wisdom of the Magi must have been accessible to the Hebrew Illuminati. Don't be scared. It doesn't mean a bunch of old men in suits controlling your destiny. 11. This ancient mystical tradition of the Hebrews possessed three literatures: the books of the law and the prophets, which are known to us as the Old Testament, the Talmud, or a collection of learned commentaries thereon, and the Kabbalah, or mystical interpretation thereof, right? So we got the Old Testament, we got the Talmud, and then we have Kabbalah, right? And she says here, Kabbalah is actually the mystical interpretation of the Old Testament and the Talmud, as we can clearly see when we go back and look into this text. Just like the quote up here, this is from the Bible, right? The kings of Edom who ruled, whose kingdoms are unbalanced force. That's a reference to the clip-off. And then we've seen plenty other references to the different spheres of the tree in the Practical Guide to Kabbalistic Symbolism. So check this part out. Of these three, the ancient rabbis say that the first, the Old Testament, is the body of the tradition. The second, the Talmud, is its rational soul. And the third, Kabbalah, is its immortal spirit, right? So the Old Testament would be the body, the Talmud would be the rational soul or the mind, and then the Kabbalah would actually be the immortal spirit of the word. Ignorant men may with profit read the first, the Old Testament. Learned men study the second, the Talmud. But the wise meditate upon the third, Kabbalah. It is a strange thing that Christian exegesis has never sought the keys to the Old Testament in the Kabbalah. Number 12. In our Lord's day, there were three schools of religious thought in Palestine: the Pharisees and the Sadducees, of whom we read so frequently in the Gospels, and the Essenes, who are never referred to. Esoteric tradition avers that the boy Jesus ben Joseph, when his caliber was recognized by the learned doctors of the law who heard him speak in the temple at the age of 12, was sent by them to the Essenian community near the Dead Sea to be trained in the mystical tradition of Israel, and that he remained there until he came to John to be baptized in the Jordan before commencing in his mission at the age of 30. Be that as it may, The closing cause of the Lord's Prayer is pure Kabbalism. We saw this in a practical guide to Kabbalistic symbolism. So it says here, the closing clause of the Lord's Prayer is Kabbalism. Malkuth is the kingdom, Hod is the glory, Netzach is the power. Those form the basal triangle of the tree of life, with Yesod, the foundation, or receptacle of influences, as the central point. Whoever formulated that prayer knew his Kabbalah. Good stuff. Peace, Divine Dre, freezing the game. Divine Dre says, love your cadence, bro. Just fell out with a goddess because she wouldn't slow down and try to comprehend. See. Everyone has their pattern and rhythm, right? Some work better from you, some don't. But you're in a good place. 13. Christianity had its esotericism in the Gnosis, which owed much to both Greek and Egyptian thought. In the system of Pythagoras, we see an adaptation of the Kabbalistic principles to Greek mysticism. So she's connecting dots here. Remember, this whole first section is about the fountainhead from which the tradition springs. So she's covered Judaism. She's talking a bit now about Gnosticism, Greek and Egyptian thought, right? Linking back to Pythagoras. And how she says here, the system of Pythagoras, we see an adaptation of the Kabbalistic principles to Greek mysticism. So Greek mysticism has even adapted Kabbalistic principles. And what did she say previously about that which is not antagonistic will be assimilated? So in other words, there's a lot of traditions around the world that are based on truth and true principles, and that's why they're able to work seamlessly with Kabbalah. With Kabbalah, you're not limited to one book of rules. It's more like an overall symbolic system where other things can fit into it, almost like mix and match Legos, but not just because, it's something that you're emotionally attached to, but because we're dealing with principles, original essence, right? Not necessarily something that some dude came up with. "14. The exoteric, state-organized section of the Christian church persecuted and stamped out the esoteric tradition section, destroying every trace of its literature upon which it could lay its hands in striving to eradicate the very memory of a gnosis from human history." So it's well documented and true that once the Christian church began to take over the world, essentially, they literally went out in an attempt to destroy every trace of this science and related sciences because it proved a threat to Roman Catholicism. And obviously so, because Roman Catholicism is structured in a way to make you depend upon the church and the Pope and the leaders of the church, as opposed to looking within yourself and finding that connection personally. Instead of doing that, we've been trained to run out and find it in a pastor and a preacher, in a father, Pope figure, whatever. And also subconsciously the government, right? So literally, they figured out even back then in the Roman Catholic days that the way to take over the world was to cut people off from their spiritual relationships and force them to depend on the state and the church for their sustenance, welfare style. And obviously it was effective because it's still going on thousands of years later. Those people were pretty damn smart. It is recorded that the baths and bakehouses of Alexandria were fired for 6 months with the manuscripts from the Great Library. In other words, they took the books from the Library of Alexandria and they used it as fuel for 6 months to fire up the bathhouses and bakehouses That's a lot of paper. A lot of information sent back to the Akashic plane. Because nothing is lost. Good stuff. Good stuff. Lance Benefield says, Jesus the magician. Absolutely. Karma says that unicorn goes hard. Oh yeah, wait till it goes blue. So very little remains to us of our spiritual heritage in the ancient wisdom. Everything that was above ground was swept away, and it is only with the excavation of ancient monuments in the sands have swallowed that we are beginning to rediscover its fragments. It was not until the 15th century, when the power of the church was beginning to show signs of weakening, that men dared to commit to paper the traditional wisdom of Israel. Scholars declare that the Kabbalah is a medieval forgery because they cannot trace a succession of early manuscripts. But those who know the manner of working of esoteric fraternities know that a whole cosmogony and psychology can be conveyed in a glyph, which means nothing to the uninitiated. So in other words, the way that we work in secret societies is that we're able to communicate through symbols. And people who don't understand that process, they ignore those symbols, just go about their lovely day. But those who understand the process are able to receive the messages that are sent through the symbols. So just like he says here, a lot of people, scholars, say that the early texts of Kabbalah are forgeries because they can't trace the lineage. But these same people aren't members of these societies, so of course they can't trace the lineage. The lineage was communicated in subtle ways. A lot of people ask, well, how come they wrote these occult books in code, and how come, they're not straightforward and plain? Well, the thing is, it was dangerous back then to continue teaching this information because the church ruled with a bloody iron fist. They literally tortured and burned people for teaching anything outside of Roman Catholicism. So of course it had to be communicated and conveyed in a way that was very subtle. So as she says here, those who know the manner of working of esoteric fraternities know that the whole cosmogony and psychology can be conveyed in a glyph, in a symbol, in a yantra, which means nothing to the uninitiated. These strange old charts could be handed on from generation to generation, their explanation being communicated verbally, and the true interpretation would never be lost. When in doubt as to the explanation of some abstruse point, reference would be made to the sacred glyph, and meditation thereon would unfold what generations of meditation had ensouled therein. In other words, if you don't have a teacher or someone to tell you what the glyph means, if you know how to meditate properly, you can meditate on the glyph, on the symbol, on the yantra, and begin to unlock the information that has been placed there by generations upon generations upon generations of people who are working with it. We're not the first or the last to be working with this information. So a lot of groundwork has been laid deeply. These strange old charts, you already did that part. Yeah, so check this out here. So this is important also to everything else we've been talking about, right? And even reference to Mantra and Yantra, the book that we read. It says, it is well known to mystics that if a man meditates upon a symbol around which certain ideas have been associated by past meditation, he'll obtain access to those ideas, even if the glyph has never been elucidated to him by those who have received the oral tradition by mouth to ear. If you have this book, I would definitely highlight that and think about it some more. But he's basically saying that it's well known to mystics that if a man meditates upon a symbol, right, a symbol that has certain ideas associated with it by past meditation, he will obtain access to those ideas. So consider if you had a thumb drive and you plugged it into your computer and you saved information there. You could always pull that thumb drive out and plug it into a different computer and retrieve that information. That's really how sigils work. They store information in the collective unconscious. Hence why you can have something like this in your home and it still begins to produce a subtle effect in your environment. Hence how you can have something like this in your home and it can still produce a subtle effect on your environment. But that subtle effect becomes more tangible the more that you meditate on it, the deeper the connection that you make with it. Alligator Degrader, greetings. Alligator Degrader says, greetings, Trav. That mantra and yantra book is a very powerful, magical book. Yeah, I agree. I can't wait to tap into this one either, man. All in due time. I got the other one too. The one about the Nagas. But that's for another story. $16. The organized temporal force, right? Temporal meaning time. The organized temporal force of the church availed to drive all rivals from the field and destroy their traces, right? See, today we think about Christianity as like this sweet and innocent, oh, praise the Lord, praise sweet baby Jesus, right? That's how we see it today. Very domesticated, very docile. But that's not how Christianity has always been. Christianity has been a frightening world power, right? No other culture has killed as many people on this planet as Christianity. So what she says here is, the organized temporal force of the church availed to drive all rivals from the field and destroy their traces. So if you notice, they didn't just kill their enemies, they did very diligent work to erase them from history, right? This is what the European Catholic Church has done to every other race that they could, or every other culture that didn't fall in line with Christian principles. And ones that did, they assimilated them into holidays, right? Like Christmas or Easter, and all these holidays that we celebrate that have nothing to do with Christianity, because they were assimilated from what you could call pagan holidays. But we know it's not simply a pagan holiday. That's a catch-all phrase to classify everything that wasn't Christian. We little know what seeds of mystical tradition sprang up only to be cut down during the Dark Ages. But mysticism is inherent in the human race. And although the church had destroyed all roots of tradition in her group soul, nevertheless devout spirits within her fold rediscovered the technique of the soul's approach to God and developed a characteristic yoga of their own, closely akin to Bhakti yoga of the East. See, the first few times I read this book, I didn't know what a Bhakti yoga was. So understand what she's saying here. Mysticism isn't like a religion or a belief system. Mysticism is a word for something that is inherent in the human race. So no matter how many people the church kills and has killed, no matter how many races that they've eradicated, how many cultures that they've stomped out, how many artifacts they've stolen, no matter all that stuff that the Christian church has done, mysticism is something that can't be wiped away because it is inherent to the human. It is inherent to our race. So it cannot be killed. Hell, there wouldn't even be Christianity if it wasn't for mysticism, right? But what Christianity seeks to do is stomp out all competitors, right? It's a business. The literature of Catholicism is rich in treatises on mystical theology, which reveal practical acquaintance with the higher states of consciousness through a somewhat naive conception of the psychology thereof. thus revealing the poverty of a system which does not avail itself of the experience of tradition. So you'll see that there actually is in some of the deeper literature, yeah, there's some talk about connection with higher consciousness. But when you really start to break it down, you'll notice that it's built on a weak foundation, right? Which is why the result is a lot of people who have a weak foundation. The fruit is containing the root. Appearances fool most people, but if you know how to look for the root of the fruit, then you know what to expect before it even blossoms. 17. The Bhakti Yoga of the Catholic Church is only suitable for those whose temperament is naturally devotional and who find their readiest expression in loving self-sacrifice, right? This is Bhakti Yoga, right? You guys hopefully remember when we talked about Bhakti Yoga in these previous books. But that's a pretty good definition that she gives there. The Bhakti Yoga of the Catholic Church is only suitable for those whose temperament is naturally devotional, right? So that Bhakti Yoga, that style is going to be best for people who are naturally eager to express their love in self-sacrifice. Because some people are not. But it is not everybody who is of this type, and Christianity is unfortunate in not having any choice of systems to offer its aspirants, right? And that's what we've learned also. You've got these 8 branches of yoga, and each ones are different styles of coming into an experience with the inner self, whereas Christianity only really offers one style. So what happens is there are some people who do really well with Christianity, but there are a vast majority of people who don't quite get it. They might go to church because everyone else does, right? They may repeat things because everyone else does. But this real worship aspect, most people don't understand how to actually do it. We might see people in the local church and you know, they put their hands up and close their eyes, and we think that that's what worship is, but we don't know what they're actually doing when their eyes are closed, right? Or like in black churches, you'll see people run around and catch the Holy Ghost, and I'm sure some people really do get overwhelmed with that Kundalini energy, but I've personally known people who have been known to fake it, right? People will do anything for attention. But that's not worship. That's ego. The East, being tolerant, is wise and has developed various yoga methods, each of which is pursued by its adherents to the exclusion of others. And yet none would deny that the other methods are also paths to God for those to whom they are suited. So in other words, when you look at the ancient traditions of the East, there wasn't just one style, there were multiple styles. We know that Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of self-sacrifice and worship. We know that Gyan Yoga is coming to know God through the diligent study of self, through diligent study of how the mind works and how the mind experiences reality. Through that study, you can come to God. We also know that there's Karma Yoga, which is about action and behavior, right? You'll see certain people who like to give, who like to do kind acts, and that gets them closer to God. There's also Raja Yoga. There's also Hatha Yoga, which deals with the body postures and the stretches. That's what everyone thinks of when they hear yoga. But there's different angles to get to God. They're not different religions. These are just different methods to come into an experience of your higher nature. And each one is suited for the individual. There's no one size fits all when it comes to spirituality. However, no matter which path you choose, as long as you're serious about it, we all get to the same point. Greetings, Hikate. We grow natural. Long time no see. Alligator says Bhakti is the love yoga. Exactly. Divine Dre says the Buddha in the Diamond Sutra said, "Not in all the universe is there 3 vehicles to enlightenment, let alone 2. High science." 18. In consequence of this deplorable limitation on the part of our theology, many Western aspirants take up Eastern methods. For those who are able to live in Eastern conditions and work under the immediate supervision of a guru, this may prove satisfactory. But it seldom gives good results when the various systems are pursued with no other guide than a book and under modified Western conditions. Unmodified Western conditions. So in other words, even though we just talked about those 8 different paths of yoga, these paths do belong to an Eastern mindset. So we have to understand that the people who practice yoga in the East, they have a different mind than we do. They don't live in the West with a cell phone in our face 24/7, with advertisements being bombarded and trying to steal our attention, and all the, our entitlement to comfort, right? That's all Western. So when we approach something like yoga, it's very difficult for us to understand because we live in a different way than they do. In the East, they live, when they practice yoga, they move into an ashram and they take on their guru literally as, they obey the guru as their leader and path to enlightenment. In the West, we couldn't dare to fathom anything like that, right? We couldn't dare sacrificing what we believe is our freedom intentionally, because spirituality isn't usually that important to the typical Western. So what she's saying here is it's going to be difficult to live in the lifestyle that the Easterners live or the yogis live unless we really were to move into an ashram and separate ourselves from Western culture. She says if all we have is a book and an environment that hasn't changed from before, we're not going to do so well. She said it seldom gives good results when the various systems, these different systems of yoga, are pursued with no other guide than a book and under unmodified Western conditions. 19. It is for this reason that I would recommend to the white races the traditional Western system, which is admirably adapted to their psychic constitution. In other words, if you're dealing with Europeans or people who are under a Western civilization mindset, which includes all of you here, most likely in America, we've all been conditioned with a European mindset, with a Western civilization mindset. So she says here, it is for this reason I would recommend to the white races the traditional Western system, which is admirably adapted to their psychic constitution. Because we have been conditioned, I almost said domesticated, but we don't know any better. None of us do. Because we've been conditioned into this Western system, Western civilization, our psychic constitution has been modified. So that's why it's so hard for us to sit down and meditate. That's why it's so hard for us to be consistent with these things that we're trying to do, because our psychic constitution has been modified based to our culture, based to American culture, European culture, Western culture, right? So she says Kabbalah is her recommendation to access what the people in the East are accessing. Does that make sense? Let me know if that makes sense. Will Trent, peace. Will Trent says chapters 1 through 3. Oh shit, okay, can't wait to get off work. Yeah, and we're only on the 17th verse of the first chapter. I don't know if it'll be all 3 chapters. We might run it through just because I posted the thumbnail, but I wanted to really go for 3 hours. So depending on where we are, we might get through chapter 2. I'll just change the thumbnail, but we'll see. All right, let's continue. Yeah, I would recommend to the white races the traditional Western system, which is admirably adapted to their psychic constitution. It gives immediate results, right? Because we're the microwave generation. We got to have it now. Like, really picture in your head, right? Picture bald headed yogi, people that we've been reading about for the past 6 months, over here meditating every day, right? Doing their rituals, sitting up in the Himalaya mountains, right? Imagine that compared to you right now, watching YouTube, watching Pornhub, eating fast food, playing video games, keeping up with sports, scared of the coronavirus and the vaccine, scared of demiurge, like all, look at how different the minds are. So naturally, if we try to do what Swami's doing, it's going to be very difficult. But notice how easily we adapt to Kabbalah. It fits us better. It fits our mindset better. You feel me? Lance Benefield says, yes, Trev, I thought I was just being lazy sometimes. It's just the mindset. Right. It's not your fault. You know what I'm saying? I'm not giving anybody a pass now. You got to have some kind of discipline. Don't get it twisted now. She talked about the essentials. One of the essentials is you got to have some discipline to you too. But also understand that your whole life you've been raised in a way to keep you, your whole life you've been raised in such a way that makes following these Eastern traditions damn near impossible. Have you ever talked to like just a person out there about yoga and meditation? A lot of times they'll either be like, no, not really my thing at best. And at worst, they'll be like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to just sit around and do nothing, right? Because they're looking at it from a Western mindset. You feel me? Sunshine Chick says drinking margaritas. Right. You're not going to see Swami doing that. Living in the Zone says that's true. Their way of life is completely different. Is that yours? It is huge and I don't understand. It's probably hers. I thought you gave that to her. Nuru says the Egypt, Kemet, Meta-Neter, and Vedas and Platonic Greek and Kabbalistic metaphysics are all monistic. That is the science of the one, the singular sheet of energy that is everything in the cosmos. Tat Tvam Asi. Yes. Momokse says, nowadays I'm seeing the self-sacrifice and discipline as a means of self-initiation. Yeah, it very well can be. And it's very nice if you're able to reframe painful experiences in that way because you make it work for you. All right, so I'll recommend to the white races the traditional Western system, which is admirably adapted to their psychic constitution. It gives immediate results, and if done under proper supervision, not only does it not disturb the mental or physical equipoise, as happens with regrettable frequency when unsuitable systems are used, but it produces a unique vitality. That's another thing. A lot of people who don't know any better ask about how to open your third eye and should I open my third eye and how do I unlock my kundalini, all this other stuff. But you'll find that when a Western person, quote unquote, opens their third eye or unlocks their kundalini, it's a terrifying experience, right? Just think how all of you in this chat don't really know too many people to talk to about this information. So imagine if you didn't have anybody to talk to and you did open up that third eye or open up that kundalini and you didn't have anybody to help you understand what was going on. You know that your mother, friends, or whoever are going to try to sign you up for the crazy house because no one's going to be able to explain what's going on because, again, they don't study this stuff. So they're going to say that you've got some kind of schizophrenia, you had a mental breakdown, etc., right? It takes a very strong person to be able to have their eyes open and see things and still be able to function in society without looking crazy, right? So, talking about opening your third eye and Kundalini awakening, it is not a pleasant experience if your mind isn't conditioned for it, right? Think about it. If you're too busy to meditate, how are you going to be able to be still and try to make sense of what's happening to you? Yet, people play around with things, and, you know, every now and then, doors are opened and things are found inside the doors. Not to say that to scare anybody, but I'm sure you've all heard it happen. I've talked with a lot of you, and it has happened, right? Some of you are still trying to heal from those experiences. Even Swami Niranjanananda said it was a terrifying experience when he actually made dharana on accident with a tree. It was horrifying. Just keep that in mind the next time you see videos about people talking about having their third eye open and their kundalini awakened. You never heard me say nothing like that. So it gives immediate results, and if done under proper supervision, not only does it not disturb the mental or physical equipoise, as happens with regrettable frequency when unsuitable systems are used, but it produces a unique vitality. So that's not to say that yoga is evil and these things are evil. No, that says that the individual was not quite prepared for what they went through. None of this stuff is evil, right? Don't point to this stuff if something negative happens. You have to be able to take accountability with the individual, because that's the only way to fix it. If you point to this and say it's evil, now you have a boogeyman. You can't fix it. But if you can point to yourself and say, you know what, I wasn't ready, I didn't understand, you can fix that, because now you can learn to make yourself ready, to make yourself understand. It is this peculiar vitality of the adepts which lead to the tradition of the elixir of life. I have known a number of people in my time who might justly be considered adepts, and I've always been struck by that peculiar ageless vitality they all possess. There's a certain elixir of life that is unlocked when you start working with this material, right? And for those of you who have taken my class or who have studied this yoga stuff, understand that increase in prana, right? That increase of prana helps to revitalize the body more frequently. It slows the aging process down. Another good reason to meditate. Another good reason to breathe deeply, because prana is brought into your body mainly through the breath. We don't pay attention to how shallow we breathe, right? Uppity unicorn, peace. Number 20. On the other hand, however, I can only endorse what all the gurus of the Eastern tradition have always averred, that any system of psycho-spiritual development can only be safely and adequately carried on under the personal supervision of an experienced teacher. Notice how that's in highlight. For this reason, although I shall give in these pages the principles of the mystical Kabbalah, I do not consider it would be in anybody's best interest to give the keys to its practice, even if by the terms of the obligation of my own initiation were not forbidden to do so. But on the other hand, I do not consider it fair to the reader to introduce intentional blinds and misinformation, and to the best of my knowledge and belief, the information I give is accurate, even if incomplete. So in other words, she's saying that the best bet here is to the best bet here is to have someone experienced to help you understand this information, right? Let's see here. How do you block? There There we go. There we go. Easy peasy. Okay, so yeah. So she says because of that, right? She's going to give in these pages the principles, the fundamentals of mystical Kabbalah, and this is what makes this book a little complex to most people. She gives the principles, but she doesn't give the keys to its practice. You see how she says that here? She gives the theory, but not the practice. That's the safest way she could do it, right? And she says she would do it this way even if her allegiance to her society didn't obligate her not to do it. All right, she said, I'll read it again. For this reason, although I shall give in these pages the principles of the mystical Kabbalah, I do not consider it would be in anybody's interest to give the keys to its practice, even if by the terms of the obligation of my own initiation, I were not forbidden to do so. So she cannot, because of what she swore into, she cannot give the keys, but she can give the theory. But she said even if she could, she wouldn't give the keys out. Now, you'll find that in many occult books that are written by someone who's part of a secret society. They can give you the what, but they cannot give you the how. They can sometimes even give you the why, but they don't really give you the how. Because those kind of things are kind of wrapped up in secrecy. You'd have to find it out on your own, hopefully by you being in a group yourself, or maybe meditating deep enough. But what we find is that what many authors also do is they add what we call blinds and intentional dead ends and things to throw you off the scent. So people who don't know any better, they might buy one of these books and they're out there in the forest looking for an eye of newt and horny toad or something like that. All these random cat's claw ingredients, thinking that that's where the magic is. But in truth, those are what's called blinds. They throw people off the track who aren't ready to actually utilize the information. But what she's saying here is that she's not going to do that, right? She says, I do not consider it fair to the reader to introduce intentional blinds and misinformation. That's why I love Dion Fortune, because she's keeping it real. Even if she can't divulge everything, she's also not going to muddy up the waters with bullshit. That's very respectable. And if you go through this book, you'll see exactly that. But you'll also see she does give some hints to the keys, and this chapter was actually a hint. Notice how she opened up the chapter saying, most people who practice occultism do not understand the fountainhead from which their tradition springs. Then she goes on to talk a whole lot about yoga. In other words, she's hinting at one of the keys to the usage of this information here will be found in yoga. She talked about Bhakti yoga specifically. Just something to be aware of. This is how you read these books. You got to pay attention to what's not being said, what's written in between the lines. So she says here, to be fair to the reader, on the other hand, I do not consider it fair to the reader to introduce intentional blinds and misinformation. And to the best of my knowledge and belief, the information I give is accurate, even if incomplete. The 32 mystical paths of the concealed glory are ways of life, and those who want to unravel their secrets must tread them. As I myself was trained, so can anyone be trained who is willing to undergo the discipline, and I will gladly indicate the way to any earnest seeker. Gotta love Miss Dion Fortune. A real one in a world full of not reals. Nuru says Kundalini can be managed if you electromagnetically ground or earth. It's like being tossed in a ring of hot voltage light. If you're grounded and unpack the charge harmonically, you're good. If not, maybe crazy. Yeah. Alligator says, well, Trav, I guess you have to be our guru then. think I do a pretty decent job. I keep it real. I don't let it get to my head. Jamar Martin asking about those cards. There's two sets of cards that I show sometimes. Which one specifically? We Grow Natural says distractions trying to interfere. Yes, we've entered a new season, if you guys haven't been sensitive enough to tell. And this season, there are a lot of distractions popping up, but hopefully you guys are prepared for that. These scam accounts that attempt to impersonate me, I don't think that they're out to scam people out of money. I think they're really just trying to distract people and cause a little bit of distrust, because there's a lot of people who don't know any better, and they'll think that, oh, this person tried to scam me, he's not legit. So don't fall for these scammers that pop up, and don't fall for any of these distractions. I think what we're doing here is a little bit more important than whatever here's going on. Love, love, love. Peace. Beautiful love. Peace, peace. Nuru says Yoda was deep, deep, deep in nature when he taught mastery of the Force recall. That is a good point. Court Singh says, I like how this starts. I'm reading Chicken Kabbalah at the moment, but I'm definitely getting this next. Yeah, this book is a must-have. Like, just wait till it actually gets into the Sephiroth. She pulls no punches. Honestly, I structured this so that we could read those other books to be prepared for this one. Without a foundation, this one is very difficult to understand. It was even for me. Momo Casey says Chicken Kabbalah. LOL. Yeah, it's actually a really good book. Check it out. Jamar Martin, you might be talking about the Vedic astrology deck, I think. One thing those scammers didn't count on is that I try to have an actual real relationship, as real as I can with you guys. So, I mean, you guys, I think, are able to pick up very quickly that it's actually not me. And just pay attention to the page. If you scroll down on that page, you'll see that there's a bunch of pictures of some girl. Like just 5 rows down. Not to mention, look at when the pictures were posted. Look how many comments. Look at the number of likes. Like, none of it adds up. So just use your context clues, and it will be easy to not fall for it. The only people that would fall for it are people who don't really know who I am. But if you've watched my channel for any length of time and have read my posts by now, you should know that it's not me, clearly. And if you do see one of those fake pages, don't just block it. Report it as fraud, as imitating someone that you know. Instagram will actually shut the page down if you do that, but they don't shut the page down if you just block them. So mark them as fraud, imitating someone that you know. We've already got 2 of their pages taken down, so that's the way that it works. All right, so chapter 2, the choice of path. No student will ever make any progress in spiritual development who flits from system to system, right? Bouncing from system to system, you're not going to make any progress, right? Jumping from Qabalah one day, then you're on tarot next week, then you're on angel guides next week, then you're on oracle cards next week, and you keep bouncing around, your left-hand path, now your right-hand path, now you're back at Christianity, now you're working with astrology. If you keep jumping around like that, you're not going to make any progress, right? That's what she says here. No student will ever make any progress in spiritual development who flits from system to system. That should definitely be highlighted, actually, because this is an all too real phenomenon. I mean, I was there, right? And I know you probably won't admit it, but you've probably been there recently if you're not still there right now. First, using some new thought affirmations, then some yoga breathing exercises and meditation postures, and then following these by an attempt at the mystical methods of prayer. Each of these systems has its value, but that value can only be realized if the system is carried out in its entirety. So the same things were happening back in the 1940s that are happening now, right? Look, the same thing. She says, first you're going to try some affirmations, then you try some yoga breathing exercises, then some meditation postures. You might follow it up with some mystical methods of prayer. Each of these has its value, but that value can only be realized if the system is carried out in its entirety. They are the calisthenics of consciousness and aim at gradually developing the powers of the mind. In other words, you know what calisthenics means, right? That's a type of exercise to strengthen the body, strengthen the lungs, strengthen the blood. When you stick with one track, it's the same thing as going to the gym and exercising the same set of muscles, right? They strengthen, they get stronger, they start to develop. You can start to see the muscle forming. That's what happens when you stick with something for a long time. So when you're just doing a little bit of astrology here and a little bit of crystals over here next week, and you're not being consistent, you're not really growing. But the way that you develop the powers of the mind is through consistency, doing the same type of path until you actually understand that. The value does not lie in the prescribed exercises as ends in themselves, but in the powers that will be developed if they are persevered with. If we intend to take our occult studies seriously and make them anything more than desultory light reading, we must choose our system and carry it out faithfully until we arrive. If not, at its ultimate goal, at any rate, at definite practical results and a permanent enhancement of consciousness. That's what happens when you stick with it, right? Definite practical results and a permanent enhancement of consciousness. Not just seeing 1111 on the microwave, but an enhancement of consciousness and practical results that you can actually see and say, okay, this actually happened as a result of something I did. It's not magic until you have a objective result. Otherwise, it's just daydreaming. Cause and effect. After this has been achieved, we may, not without advantage, experiment with the methods that have been developed upon other paths and build up an eclectic technique and philosophy therefrom. But the student who sets out to be an eclectic before he has made himself an expert will never be anything more than a dabbler. So what she's saying is, that doesn't mean you can't learn about the other things. What she's saying is, choose one to specialize in so that you can thoroughly understand to your best ability what's going on with that system, with that path. Then once you do that, adapt another path and master it, and you'll start to see that they add together. And the more that you do this, you'll start to see that there was really one path after all. But it was so vast that you had to pick it up in pieces. Right? There's a reason I don't talk about the Goetia anymore, much like that, because I've already been through it to death. I already know what's behind it. It's not just summoning demons. You're working on different aspects of the unconscious mind. And as long as it has that spooky appeal, it impacts us on an emotional level. Likewise with going from Kabbalah to yoga. They're two sides of the same coin. And then you start to see that astrology and tarot are two aspects of Kabbalah. Like they're literally the same thing, just done in a different way. But you don't figure that out until you stick with one through and through until you figure it out. Let me know if that makes sense. A little mighty hero, peace and greetings. Sing says, stop talking about me, Trav. Hey, man, it's extremely common. You're not the only one in the chat who has gone through that or is going through that. Wyatt B asks, Brother Travis, why do you choose to wear a Rudrakasha mala? Probably, well, you know, to do my mantras. Divine Dre says, I love how you read in front of your family. As a father, I try to incorporate it, but the mother of my children doesn't like reading, sadly. Yeah, it might just be a solo thing. That's fine, because sometimes it's best to just get it for yourself, and then you can process it in such a way that they can handle it, because most people can't handle this directly, only indirectly. As a matter of fact, when it comes to psychology, the more stubborn a person is, the more indirect you have to be with them, right? You can't be direct with stubborn people because they'll resist. It's just their nature. So the best way to get through to stubborn people is to be indirect. And it also helps if you're a Gemini. Mad Bear, peace, peace. Shout out. Shout out. Tophiel. Momokse says, perhaps that's why Spirit calls me to stay in one place when it comes to the practices I do. Finish what you start type of thing, I suppose. Absolutely. Mad Titan, peace, peace. Once again, once again. Mars Champion says, I started out going through it like I was in public school, going from one subject to the next to the next. Had to realize I'm not getting graded anymore. Right, right. It's amazing how thoroughly public school has trained us to think, or not to think, actually. Divine Dre says, as an alchemist, I use all the systems as tools, as boats, vehicles to get where I want to be, which is in a state of orgasm. Right on. Deanna Raleigh. So if you look at that whole jack of all trades quote, there's actually a second part to it, which kind of cleans it up. So it's a jack of all trades, master of none, but there's a second part. You might want to Google it to see what I'm talking about. Okay, where were we? I'll read that again. But the student who sets out to be an eclectic before he has made himself an expert will never be anything more than a dabbler, right? So you don't want to jump into the game trying to grab everything you can and filling up your shopping cart, because you probably don't have the cash in the spiritual bank to buy everything. So start just like you would do anything else in the world. You wouldn't sign up and try to play basketball, football, tennis, and golf at the same time. No, you pick one, you get good at it, and you move over, right? Isn't that what the pros do who do change sports? They master one, then they go to another one. Didn't Michael Jordan try to play baseball? And I remember being in the military, there were a few guys who were overachievers, and like they would serve in the Navy and the Air Force and the Army. They couldn't do all four at once, but they served one, served the next. And I'm sure they have a deeper understanding about how the system works than the average enlisted member, because they've seen it from different angles. They've been through the whole service, right? Served whole 4 years and then went to the next branch. A whole 4 years went to the next branch. You literally can't join all the branches at once. I think President Joe Biden would be upset about that. As long as you give him something to smell, he'll be okay, right? Okay, there we go. Thank you, Deanna Riley. Good find. Jack of all trades and master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So there you go. Something to think about. Number 2, whoever has any practical experience of the different methods of spiritual development knows that the method must fit the temperament. That's important right there. The method must fit the temperament, and that it must also be adapted to the grade of development of the student, right? You gotta understand when you're dealing with people, before trying to offload a bunch of information on them. Because how many times have you guys like been out talking with somebody? Because again, we can get kind of starved of human contact and having a conversation about this occult stuff because nobody really understands it or studies it. So when we finally meet somebody, you start to word vomit and just download everything, right? No matter how deep it is. Oh yeah, this, and did you know the Malkuth and Asaya and Buddhi and Prakriti and Purusha, and you're just going all in. And eventually that person was open, but now they're closed off because you overwhelmed them, right? How many of you guys have done that before? How many of y'all still do that? Trust me, when it comes to communication, right? Because Geminis are the best communicators of the zodiac. Really, that's what we're known for. I communicate. But it's best to learn about who you're talking to and their level, then discuss what they're able to comprehend. Don't try to throw no college level stuff on somebody in the third grade. That's not a good idea. You might even slow down their progress because you kind of scare them away, right? So what she says here is whoever has any practical experience, meaning you've actually practiced and done something in the real world, whoever has any practical experience of the different methods of spiritual development, right? Like myself, they know that the method must fit the temperament. So people have different temperaments, right? You could say that people are water type, fire type, air type, earth type. And you can even break that down into tamasic air, which would be the fixed air signs, rajasic air, which would be the mutable air signs, sattvic air, which would be the cardinal air signs, or whatever. You know that there's different temperaments. So different temperaments, they handle things differently. They experience the world differently. So to be efficient at communicating, you want to learn who you're talking to and then talk to them in their language. You don't want to try to force your words on them because, again, I talked about resistance. Some of us are stubborn. We don't like being told what to do. Nothing personal, but we're just going to block everything you say if it doesn't come out right sometimes. Now, I'm not saying you have to cater to people like that. What I'm saying is if your goal is to clearly communicate, then you got to communicate in the language of who you're talking to. I mean, that's just good common sense. But she says that whoever has any practical experience of the different methods of spiritual development knows that the method must fit the temperament and that it must also be adapted to the grade of development of the student. There's things that will make no sense for me to talk about on this YouTube channel, as much as I'd love to, because I don't think that there's enough people who are at that grade of development, right? And then there's other YouTube channels who talk about things that you guys are more advanced than. It's not about better or worse. It's just talking about the temperament and what grade, what level you're at, right? It's not worse to be a third grader than it is to be a 10th grader. It's just different levels. But understand what level you're communicating with, right? It just makes sense. Yes, yes. Zaire Anu. Peace, fam. Peace. Mr. Higglesworth says, I try to give out less info when I talk to people, LOL. Yeah, I mean, in real life, I don't seek to try to talk about this stuff anymore. Like, even if people ask, I gauge and ask what they know already and try to just keep it at that level. Like, I know you think that you're opening up someone's mind and you're enlightening them, but oftentimes it just doesn't stick. It's not well received. So it's best to kind of just keep it where it is. Divine Dre, freezing the game. Thank you for that donation. I appreciate you. Divine Dre says, the best way to get through stubborn people is to be indirect. Also helps if you're a Gemini, LOL. I'm the Virgo, LOL. Divine, masculine, and feminine. Right, right. Mo B, good evening. Is it still hot over there in that gigantic state of yours? Hikategata says, I stopped talking about it. Yeah, I've found now that it brings unnecessary attention. You know what I'm saying? Wyatt B says, are you clicked up with Bro Yosef, Brother Panic, and Phil Valentine? Absolutely. I'm more clicked up than I even realized. Clicked up, clicked up. I even got the photos to prove it. Let's continue. Westerners, especially such as prefer the occult to the mystic path. Keep in mind, this group, they make a differentiation between mystic path and what's the other one? There's three different paths. We'll get to them in a second. But she says Westerners, especially such as prefer the occult to the mystic path, often come seeking initiation at a stage of spiritual development which an Eastern guru would consider exceedingly immature. Mad Bear, thank you for that donation. Thank you. Momo Casey says, I like how Panic and Valentine have that raunchy attitude when they speak. That helps to wake the mind up. Indeed, it does. There's different ways to communicate, right? Like what we've just been reading about here. You want to pick what's right for you. It's not right in my personality type to be raunchy, as you put it. I couldn't keep that act up for very long. I don't even think I could do it very well. I started doing best when I was just being myself. Ras Al Ghul says it scares the uninitiated. Indeed. Now, there's other ways to scare the uninitiated as well, and I've employed several of those. Some people stop following me because I don't worship melanin. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. So, Westerners, especially such as prefer the occult to the mystic path, often come seeking initiation at a stage of spiritual development which an Eastern guru would consider exceedingly immature. Any method that is to be available for the West must have in its lower grades a technique which can be used as a stepping stone by these undeveloped students. To ask them to rise immediately to metaphysical heights is useless in the case of the great majority and prevents a start from being made. In other words, there's a lot of people who are brand new and they jump into this and they're like, I want to be initiated. What do I need to do to get to this level and do this? Because I want these powers and we got to save black people and all this other stuff. But they wouldn't do that in the East. In the East, you don't ask to be upgraded. Your service, your lifestyle, your mindset, it naturally begins to happen, right? But in the West, we're so used to being promoted and going up a grade, right? We get that from the school system that oftentimes people think that you can just buy your way into a spiritual path. That's literally not even how it works. But there's no shortage of people who will try to sell you an initiation, right? You guys think it's bad being scammed on Instagram. Imagine being scammed by some witch doctor person in Africa. They charge you $3,000 to buy a goat and all these other tools to initiate you. And this is a true story, by the way. This used to happen a lot. It still happens. People get an email from some person in Africa because they want to be initiated into the system of their motherland or whatever. And they'll send that money over and supposedly they'll buy a goat and sacrifice it for them or whatever. And nothing actually changes, right? You can't just buy your way into it. That's a hard lesson to learn, but some of us have to learn it that way. No shade to my man who might be in the chat, but that was a good example. Any method that is available for the West must have in its lower grades a technique which can be used as a stepping stone by these undeveloped students. In other words, you're going to find a lot of meditation exercises, a lot of path working, a lot of rituals and things like that that can be used to develop your mentality so that you can be ready, right? Instead of just spending money on a witch doctor across the ocean, you could actually study these books and start practicing some of these techniques, and you'll find that your mind begins to change. Your outlook on reality starts to change. And when your outlook on reality starts to change, reality itself begins to change. You would be extremely bewildered if you understood how intricately and how much the unconscious mind produces your external reality. Because reality is perception, and you perceive what your unconscious mind conditions the conscious mind to perceive. If you look at this diagram that I showed at the beginning of this video, we could even say that this itty bitty circle right there would be the conscious mind, right? So that's you awake, thinking about your grocery list and what you have to do when you get home, and that I feed the kids, etc., etc. That's the limit of your conscious mind. All this is the unconscious mind. All learning is dependent on the unconscious mind, right? Your body is regulated. The blood flows, the breathing, your digestion. There isn't very much that you're in control of. You observe this body, but really it literally has a mind of its own. It doesn't even need you. If you just didn't do anything, the body would continue to function, right? You can't stop yourself from breathing because you hold your breath for like 2 minutes, your body's going to force you to breathe again. You can't really starve yourself unless you're extremely depressed. In that case, you're starting to override the body, but still, that's due to the unconscious influence on your conscious mind. So please understand, all the stuff that we're learning about are the different layers of the unconscious mind and how it does shape and affect the conscious mind. The more that you understand about that, the more that you'll notice reality does begin to change because your perception on reality change. Time is a filter. Time is not a tangible thing. Time is something that people agree upon, but it's not a real thing. It's a filter. You ever notice how some days seem to go by super fast and some go by super slow? It's not consistent because it's state dependent. It depends on your state of awareness at the time. When you're having, what do they say? Time flies when you're having fun, right? But time goes by extra slow when you have to do some work that you don't want to do. All that stuff is dependent on the unconscious mind. So it's not necessarily magic like Harry Potter, but there's a famous quote that says that any technology that people don't understand could be considered magic. It's only called magic because people don't understand how it works. In any case, what she said here was that any method that is to be available for the West must have in its lower grades a technique which can be used as a stepping stone by these undeveloped students, right? To ask them to rise immediately to metaphysical heights is useless in the case of the great majority and prevents a start from being made. So just throwing somebody in like that can sometimes make a person give up completely. But if you put a person through levels and stages one at a time, they can begin to practice rituals, practice meditations, and practice different path workings and ceremonies, etc., that can begin to adjust their understanding of their unconscious mind, which would then adjust their capacity to receive this type of information. Let me know in the chat if you follow. Let me know if you don't. Oh Lord, Uppity says, Lord have mercy, happened to me, both scams, Insta and Africa. Yeah. I mean, they get pretty slick, because they know what to say. They know who to target, you know. So again, it's not necessarily your fault, but just be aware that some of these people are out here and they prey on people who don't know any better. But just understand, you can't buy a spiritual level. It has to be an understanding that you come to. It's an understanding that you come to. Knowledge and understanding are the highest things, y'all. Like, look at this whole thing. If you look at the names of all 10 of the spheres, the upper triad is the most pristine and pure. Knowledge and understanding. Everything else under that is subject to ego, victory, beauty, a foundation, kingdom, severity, mercy. All those things are subject to ego. But the Bible says what? On all that getting, get understanding, knowledge and understanding. It says knowledge and understanding are the highest. Well, obviously, they're in the upper triad of the tree. Okay, so everybody seems to understand so far. That's awesome. Awesome. I must really be doing something right to have these people spend their hard-earned time to try to imitate me. I might need to assign some people in the chat as an admin so that you guys can keep these messages out of here. Tito Don, peace. It's been a while. Thank you for your donation. I appreciate you. Mad Bear says all mysteries functions are not that far from being obtained. You're closer than you realize. It's not even. All it would take is a shift in your understanding. So close. All right, well, let's continue. Living in the Zone says, I knew these bots were going to start some stuff in here because the info you're dropping is liberating. Yep, it's called balance, right? Balance. Love it. Okay, so where are we at? Okay, I wrote a note. Revelation is here, but no one has the time to practice. That's what I wrote as a note here. Let's see what I mean by that. Number 3, for a system of spiritual development to be applicable in the West, it must fulfill certain well-defined requirements, right? To begin with, its elementary technique must be such that it is readily grasped by minds that have in them nothing of the mystic. Secondly, the forces it brings to bear to stimulate the development of the higher aspects of consciousness must be sufficiently powerful and concentrated to penetrate the relatively dense vehicles of the average Westerner, who makes nothing whatever of subtle vibrations. That's a mouthful right there, but let's break this down. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. For free, right? So, for a system of development to be applicable, for it to work, it has to fit a certain criteria, right? One of them is it can't be mystic, right? And just woo, oh, the spirits told me, right? Like it can't be based on just like your feelings, right? There's got to be something a little bit more substantial for this to be shared as a group experience, right? And secondly, the forces it brings to bear to stimulate the development of the higher aspects of consciousness, right? So the forces that these systems bring you into contact with, they have to be sufficiently powerful and concentrated to be able to penetrate the dense-ass American Western European mind. right? Our minds are dense because we're extremely focused and attached to the material plane. We're extremely focused and attached to our things, right? We define ourselves by what we have and by what we've done. That's called a dense mind. So if that's the mind that we have, it's going to be extremely difficult to be able to interpret subtle vibrations because we're so focused on dense vibration, right? So again, what she says here, in order for this spiritual system to actually work with Western culture, it can't just be woo woo. Oh, the Pleiadians of the third dimension. And no shade to people who have a science like that. What I'm saying is people who say these things that they've heard someone else say with no way to explain it themselves. That's what I mean, right? Anything can work, but you have to understand how or why it works for you personally. But also, she's saying here that whatever forces that these systems put you into contact with need to be strong enough to move you out of a dense mindset. Because a dense mindset doesn't pay attention to subtle vibrations. Every now and then we may get a feeling, right? We may, oh, something told me not to do this, or something told me to do that. Every now and then we might get that sense. But a sensitivity can be developed to start receiving those subtle vibrations more frequently. Thirdly, as few Europeans following a racial dharma of material development, right? So notice also she's saying here that races as a whole have certain karma and certain dharma. She says, thirdly, as few Europeans following a racial dharma of material development have either the opportunity or the inclination to lead the life of a recluse, the forces employed must be handled in such a way that they can be made available during the brief periods that the modern man or woman can, at the commencement of the path, snatch from their daily avocations to give to the pursuit. So what she's saying here is, because of the racial dharma of Europeans to develop the material plane, to terraform the earth, which is what they're doing, right? That's the racial dharma. That's supposed to happen. They're supposed to spill oil into the ocean, right? They're supposed to build buildings and cars to put smog in the air and all that stuff. That's supposed to happen. But the thing is, that is our generation and our culture today. So we're too busy to sit still. We're too busy to meditate all day. As a whole culture and civilization, we're too busy to do all that stuff. So a system has to be made that it can fit within our busy lifestyles, right? Because we can't move away to a ashram somewhere and meditate under a bald-headed yogi. That's not how we do it in the West, which is another reason why Kabbalah works so well for Westerners. So like she says, we don't have the inclination to live like a recluse. So the forces that we're dealing with, they have to be able to be handled in such a way that we can still go to work and deal with our family and all that other stuff without appearing to have lost our minds, right? Remember earlier we talked about people who have a third eye opening or kundalini awakening. Well, if that was the real case, that would start to cause conflict with your daily life, because you begin to see things and experience things that don't fit in with what you're used to, especially if you don't have anyone to talk to about it. They must, that is to say, be handled by a technique which enables them to be readily concentrated and equally readily dispersed, right? So you got to be able to work with this energy and work with it in potency, but also release it so it doesn't linger. So it doesn't linger and cause you to behave erratically or cause those around you to behave erratically. Because it is not possible to maintain these high psychic tensions while living the hard driving life of the citizen of a European city. Experience proves with unfailing regularity that the methods of psychic development which are effectual and satisfactory for the recluse produce neurotic conditions and breakdowns in the person who pursues them while compelled to endure the strain of modern life. So look, if you have a busy American lifestyle or Western civilization lifestyle, running around, trying to make money, trying to pay the bills, trying to hook up with people, and all this other stuff that we do, suddenly trying to become magical and spiritual and this esoteric information can cause neurotic conditions in the mind, can cause a person to break down. Why? Because we're dealing with literally two different walks of life. And didn't we go through this in January? Didn't we go through a book that was called The Paths of Poverty and Nivriti, explicitly talking about these two paths? One path that is getting further involved in the outside world, and then one path that is becoming further involved with the interpersonal world. At some point, sacrifices are going to have to be made, right? Simply because you can't reach a certain depth without letting go of some things, right? Not because some spooky demon wants you to sacrifice for it, but in order to proceed on these paths, some things have to be let go of. MC Maestro, welcome, peace, and thank you for your donation. Tito the Don, thank you. Tito the Don says, it's been a while. It's like I practice what I've learned in life as we grow, and then I'm back for more knowledge. You do a great work, my friend. Thank you. Miss Emix says, that's true, facts. Too busy living in this world to sit and study like I want. Right. That's just the way that our modern society is structured. Momo Kasei says, practicality and realism is key indeed. Yes, practicality and realism. Thank you, living in the zone. If you guys are just coming in, please be sure to hit the like button because that helps in multiple ways. Up at the Unicorn says, my late partner took care of me, allowing me to be reclusive. And I hope that was a wonderful time for you. Deanna Riley, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for that donation. Love says, perhaps this is why psychedelic tourists experience various versions of mental breakdown. Absolutely. Because you're playing with two different worlds here, and you're trying to force one into the other, something has to give. Ms. Emex, thank you so much for your donation. Thank you. Okay, so let's continue here. I'll read that last sentence again. Experience proves with unfailing regularity that the methods of psychic development, which are effectual and satisfactory for the recluse, they're effective for somebody who lives at home and doesn't interact with the outside world very much, right? Experience proves with unfailing regularity that the methods of psychic development, which are effectual and satisfactory for somebody, for the hermit, right? For the one who stays at home and does nothing but this. Those same practices produce neurotic conditions and breakdowns in the person who pursues them while compelled to endure the strain of modern life. So it probably wouldn't be wise to try to, do exactly what I do, because there's some things that I don't have to worry about that other people do. But that's the way that I wanted my life to be, so I made it that way. Likewise, if that's the way that you want your life to be, there are ways to make it that way. So much the worse for modern life, some may say, and adduce this undeniable fact as an argument for modifying our Western ways of living. Far be it from me to maintain that our civilization is perfect or that wisdom originated and will die with us, but it appears to me that if our karma, or destiny, has caused us to be incarnated in a body of a certain racial type and temperament, it may be concluded that is the discipline and experience which the lords of karma consider we need in this incarnation, and that we shall not advance the cause of our evolution by avoiding or evading it. In other words, if you were born into a body where you have like 6 kids and 3 jobs, and you still want to learn about Kabbalah, you're not cursed, right? You didn't get bad luck. This is the mission for you. This is literally the perfect mission that your soul came into this body to learn, right? So it's not a curse, it's not a bad thing. Whatever your situation is, this is the situation you're supposed to have. Your situation is supposed to look like somebody else's. Your situation is yours, right? Your struggles, your obstacles are unique to you, right? So it doesn't matter if you're lonely and you can't find a partner, but you want to do magic also, but you're just too sad. That's your specific journey and mission that you're meant to neutralize, harmonize, and overcome. Or like I said, if you're super busy with like 8 jobs and you can barely tune in to this YouTube channel for like but 30 minutes, it's supposed to be that way. And you're supposed to use that as a form of discipline. See, this is all about reframing. You don't ever sit there and believe that you're cursed and you're fucked up and you got bad luck. No, because in a way that's kind of lazy. Understand that whatever your situation is, be grateful for it, because this is your perfect opportunity to learn, to grow, to exercise, and to become stronger. Check. Let me know if that makes sense. I agree. I see. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Upper the Unicorn. The two worlds, they don't mix. You can try, but the more you try to force it, the more things start to break. Naturally, Nature said, this is like what we spoke about earlier today, Travis. Yes, I'm seeing it. I am seeing it. Hekate says, I'm still doing this with 3 jobs, right? So there is a way. There is always a way. But it depends on how, it depends on you. I seen your personal notebook, Hekate. I seen you got a book damn near as thick as this one with personal notes that you wrote, right? With 3 jobs, how do you find the time to do that? Tito Dodon says all about perception, so make everything that happens to you work in your favor. Exactly. Moby says, I totally get it. I will never work for anyone ever again. I just don't have it in me. Precisely. Or at least not for someone who's incompetent. I'll never do that again. Hikate says, after work, I go over his videos and listen to what you say. It's 11:11. It's 11:11. We must be doing a good thing. Momo Kase says, I bring my books to work. Yeah, you sound like me. I used to bring my works to book. I used to read on my walk to work, read on my lunch break, and read on my way back. And folks thought I was mad. How do you read while you're walking? How do you breathe while you're walking? Caveman. We Grow Natural says, I manage with 5 kids. Right. And that says something about you. That says something about how serious you are. What you actually see as, that shows what you value, basically, right? Instead of making an excuse, you find out how you can make it work, right? And like I said, it's not meant to look like someone else's life. You do what's right for you. And you're doing an excellent job. Please keep it up. Because there's a reason for it. Nuru says, big up, Hekate Goddess. You're inspiring, like 3 a.m. meditations after a full workday. Yes. J.O. says the group is growing, bro, looking strong. Yes, yes, it is. And I'm very happy about it. MC Maestro says, I'd scoured my lunch break 2 years ago for this book. Man, I used to carry this thing with me everywhere. This and Durana Darshan. Ms. Zemek says, so is it bad that I just listened to the audiobook? You're getting the information. You're getting the information. So how could it be bad? You are downloading that information to your unconscious mind. Listen to it while you sleep. Remember what I said about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is a tiny dot in an infinite ocean of the unconscious. Listen to that audiobook. Listen to it while you sleep. You're getting it. You don't need to consciously remember it, because it's like a seed. When you plant stuff like that in your unconscious mind, it begins to sprout roots and it begins to bear fruit. And you may have even forgotten, and you'll have these ideas. I wonder where that came from. Well, probably that audiobook you're listening to. Living in the Zone says, I admire your dedication, Hecate. Right. Black Knight says, gotta have that Mamba mentality for the village. Right, right. Right. So I'm glad you guys get it. I'm glad you guys understand, right? And this is why I'm not too concerned about any scammers, because you guys are smarter than that. And to anyone who may have fallen for the scammer, I'm not saying that you're stupid. What I'm saying is that we're dealing with a lot of people here who are critical thinking and actually care about this information. Typically, other people that are not critical thinkers and don't care about this information, they'll just fall for anything. But if you did get scammed by one of my imitators, it's probably because you had a lot of trust in me. And I apologize that you had to go through that. But hopefully, it wasn't for too much. I know one person got scammed out of $11 by someone who was impersonating me. $11? That in itself shows that it's not even about the money. They're literally just trying to distract my audience and the people who are coming to get this information. But like I said, y'all are smarter than that. I'm proud to attract such intelligent people. All right, let's keep going. Because I said 3 hours and it is getting there. We can at least finish this chapter and then we'll see how it goes once I get to the end. MC Maestro says NLP to the max. My ears almost melted. Study and practice. Uppity says my scammers weren't Trav scammers. Okay. But no matter how many imitators pop up, they cannot and will not stop this, because this is bigger than me. Even if I die, they cannot stop this. So don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is I never left you. Naturally Nature says it can be a challenge being a full-time wife, parent, business owner, but I quell my mind with no, I am that I am first, and this feeds my soul so I can wear those other hats. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Doing it and doing it and doing it well. J.O. says, if your shirt ain't off, it ain't Trav. Man, my shirt is off right now. Greetings, I'm fully dressed Travis Magus, and I'm offering you a reading. The ancestors have told me you need a reading. Nah, that ain't legit, buddy. You're wearing a collared shirt button up to the top. And look, he's got no oil on his skin. He's completely ashy. This ain't Trav. This ain't the Trav I know. Wyatt B says, I just donated $1,000 to some guy named Travis Magus. Oh, hell no. Nehru says when the masquerade becomes too difficult to maintain for the sake of family prisons, it's time to pass on the reunion and give thanks for the path from alone to all one. Yeah, I can't do the masquerade. It's too heavy. It just feels just nope, can't do it. Never again. Never be fake for anybody. I don't care about no feelings. Momo says, look for the shirt off, rouge or beads, and natty hair. All right, now you lost me at the natty hair. I don't know what you're talking about. Natty hair. Let me see. Maestro says, Ashy Trav. Travis Ashes here with 1VX888. Right? Ash on the corner of the lips. Nah. Ground beef chest hair. Talking about welcome. This is IVX888. Welcome. Moby says, I'd rather be whole than be good, right? All right, let's keep going. Because like I said, I'm trying to keep this time limit. Ashe. Travis Ashes is the bizarro. Evil Trav. And here this dude comes again. All right, so much the worse for modern life. Did we do that already? Yeah, okay, so talking about it can be concluded that is the discipline and experience which the lords of karma consider we need in this incarnation, right? Your situation you have now is the one that you need. It was delineated by karma, by destiny. Yes, by this point, there is work that can be done to begin to override that. But from now all the way back to the infinity of your being, your physical experience has been ruled by karma. And it will continue to be ruled by karma, but you can transcend that. But just understand where you are right now is where you're supposed to be, no matter what. So embrace that and make it the best. Right? So we will not advance the cause of our evolution by avoiding or evading our situation. I've seen so many attempts at spiritual development that were simply evasions of life's problems. That's a big one right there. Please check yourself and make sure this is not you. I have seen so many attempts at spiritual development that were simply evasions of life's problems, right? You're spiritual in love and light because you don't want to face reality. Don't do that. Stuffed dog, back in the building. I was just thinking about you yesterday, bro. All right, so again, one more time. Make sure this is not you, and if it is, go ahead and start correcting it. I have seen so many attempts at spiritual development that were simply evasions of life's problems that I am suspicious of any system which involves a breach with the group soul of the race. Nor am I impressed by a dedication to the higher life, which by peculiarities of clothing and bearing and by the manner of cutting or omitting to cut the hair. True spirituality never advertises itself. All right? So check this out. It's not about, because she says the group soul, right? There's a group soul, and that's what culture is. That's through social matrix. It expresses itself as a group, right? So even though I do what I do, I still have to be a part of this group soul. If I were to break away and run away, is a very high likelihood that part of my running away into the wilderness is an evasion of life's problems, right? But in truth, no, I have responsibilities here. My flesh has karma here, right? And likewise, it's not necessarily holy because a bunch of people escape to a plot of land and start cutting their hair a certain way and dressing in a certain color, and everybody's living this natural lifestyle out in the woods somewhere. Although it might be fun, but for the most part, let's keep it real. Most of those people aren't there because they're trying to, you know, reach enlightenment. There might be a lot of this evasion of life's problems going on. I'm not going to talk too much on that because it can get kind of scary, right? Living in the Zone says she done exposed the conscious Hotep community. Right? And notice, this book was written in the 40s. Nothing new under the sun. This shit hasn't changed. The same stuff that's going on now was going on back then. True spirituality never advertises itself, right? 5, the racial dharma of the West is the conquest of dense matter. She said that a little bit earlier. She said, as few Europeans following a racial dharma of material development, in other words, they literally have a purpose here as a race to terraform the material plane, to master the material plane. That's what Western civilization is here to do. That's what time it is. So don't get mad at the oil spills. Don't get mad at the whales, the birds falling out the sky. Don't get mad at HARP. Don't get mad at the Large Hadron Collider. No, don't get mad at any of that stuff. All that is supposed to happen. It's part of the dharma of the people who rule the planet today. Right? So the racial dharma of the West is the conquest of dense matter. If this were realized, it would explain many problems in the relationships of West and East. In order that we may conquer dense matter and develop the concrete mind, we are now endowed by our racial heritage with a particular type of physical body and nervous system, just as other races, such as the Mongolian and the Negro, are endowed with other types. So look, this is a European white lady, and she's telling it like it is. She said from her lips, right? This isn't just, she's a psychologist. She, I believe, is very experienced in healing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Extremely advanced. So this isn't just a woman's opinion, right? This is based on a lot of study. According to her, the racial dharma of the white race is the conquest of dense matter. And it is also reflected in a lot of different things, right? She says here, in order that we may conquer dense matter and develop the concrete mind, we are endowed by our racial heritage with a particular type of physical body and nervous system, just as other races, such as the Mongolian or Asian and the Negro, are endowed with other types. It is injudicious to apply to one type of psychosocial makeup the developing methods adapted to another. They will either fail to produce adequate results or produce unforeseen and possibly undesirable results. To say this is not to condemn the Eastern methods, nor to decry the Western Constitution, which is as God made it, but to reaffirm the old adage that one man's meat is another man's poison. In other words, every system ain't for everybody. Wyatt B says, does Travis have a schedule for his lives or does he hop on randomly? I try to get on at 8 p.m. Yeah, so we'll try to stick with 8 p.m. That's usually when I do it. Stuff Dog says, it's great to be back. You thought me up, Trav. I've been waiting on a starting point. Seems like I've been coming in the middle of everything. Well, you made it to the starting point. Uppity Unicorn, you did not hear it incorrectly. I was speaking to the reptile. Uppity says, giving manifest destiny. Yeah, just reading from the book. Matthew Watson, peace. Wyatt B says 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes, sir. 7. The dharma of the West differs from that of the East. It is therefore desirable to try and implant Eastern ideals in a Westerner. Is it desirable to implant Eastern ideals in a Westerner? Withdrawal from the earth plane is not his line of progress, right? Because that's what the East deals with. Withdrawal from the earth plane. So it doesn't fit so well if we try to teach that as a lifestyle to the Westerner because of the culture and the temperament. Right? Withdrawal from the earth plane is not his line of progress. The normal, healthy Westerner has no desire to escape from life. His urge is to conquer it and reduce it to order and harmony. And wouldn't it make sense if you don't have that experience of conquering matter in your genetics? Wouldn't it make sense that you would seek to attain that, right? Everything evolves one step at a time. The same way that you have some people in different grades in school, you got different people running around the earth in different evolutionary karmic grades. Nice one up at a unicorn. The normal healthy Westerner has no desire to escape from life. His urge is to conquer it and reduce it to order and harmony. It is only the pathological types who long to cease upon the midnight with no pain, to be free from the wheel of birth and death. The normal Western temperament demands life, more life. Ain't that true? Uh-oh, there's my 88. Useless Familiar, thank you for your donation. Peace, peace, and welcome, my friend, welcome. MC Maestro says different style of deities in the East and the West for different things. Yes, yes. Different temperament, different mindset, different culture, different everything. Even if you look at the Circuit of Force by Dion Fortune, she even puts the root chakra at the feet because Westerners stand up a lot, whereas Easterners are always sitting. They sit more frequently because they meditate as a way of life. So their root chakra is at the root of their spine. But for Westerners, the root chakra is going to be at our feet because we spend so much time on our feet. Useless Familiar says, much love, Trav. I missed most of this, but I'll be listening on the drive to work tomorrow. Thanks again for all you do. Thank you. I enjoy those messages. Okay, let's continue. 8. It is this concentration of life force that the Western occultist seeks in his operations. He does not try to escape from matter into spirit, leaving an unconquered country behind him to get on as best as it may. Check it out. As a Westerner, you're here to conquer Malkuth. You're here to reshape Malkuth into heaven on earth. You're here to reshape Malkuth as heaven on earth. You're not here to run away from Malkuth, right? I ain't coming back to this place no more. No, that's coming from evasion of life's problems. I ain't never incarnating here again. If you hear people saying that, 9.5 times out of 10, it's because they're hurt and they've experienced something painful and it hasn't healed. So they say, I ain't coming back here no more, right? Malkuth is meant to be conquered and reshaped, not run away from. You're gonna go back to spirit. Don't worry about that. But you're here right now for a reason. He does not try to escape from matter into spirit, leaving an unconquered country behind him to get on as best as it may. He wants to bring the Godhead down into manhood and make divine law prevail, even in the kingdom of the shades. We call that the clip-off. This is the root motive for the acquisition of occult powers upon the right-hand path, and explains why initiates do not abandon all for the mystic divine union, but cultivate a white magic. So she's saying the point for most of us isn't to run away to Sky Daddy, but to bring Sky Daddy down to earth and become Sky Daddy on earth. You know, kind of like how Christ did. That's what we're supposed to do. I ain't never coming back. MC Maestro says, even in Taught with Shooty, the goal is the conquering of the physical plane, right? Nine, it is this white magic which consists in the application of occult power to spiritual ends, by means of which a large proportion of the training and development of the Western aspirant is carried out. I have seen something of a good many different systems, and in my opinion, the person who tries to dispense with ceremonial is working at a great disadvantage. Development by meditation alone is a slow process in the West, because the mind stuff upon which it has to work, right, our chitta, and the mental atmosphere in which the work has to be done are very resistant, right? And what did I say about resistance? The best way to conquer it is indirectly. The only purely meditative school of Western yoga is that of the Quakers, and I think that they would agree that their path is for the few. The Catholic Church combines mantra yoga with its bhakti yoga. Interesting, right? Interesting. Oh, look. Oh, look. What to do, what to do. 10. It is by means of formula that the occultist selects and concentrates the forces he wishes to work with. These formula are based upon the Kabbalistic tree of life. And whatever system he may be working, whether he be assuming the god forms of Egypt or evoking the inspiration of Iacchus with chant and dance, he has the diagram of the tree at the back of his mind. It is in the symbolism of the tree that the Western initiates are drilled, and it supplies the essential ground plan of classification to which all other systems can be related. The ray upon which the Western aspirant works has manifested itself through many different cultures and developed a characteristic technique in each. The modern initiate works a synthetic system, sometimes using an Egyptian, a Greek, or even a Druidic method, for different methods are best suited for different purposes and conditions. In all cases, however, the operation he designs is strictly related to the path of the tree of which he is master. If he possesses the grade which corresponds to the Sephirah Netzach, he can work with the manifestation of the force of that aspect of the Godhead, distinguished by the Kabbalists by the name of the Tetragrammaton Elohim, in whatever system he may select. In the Egyptian system, it will be the Isis of nature, in the Greek, Aphrodite, in the Nordic, Freya, and in the Druidic, Ceridwen. In other words, he possesses the powers of the sphere of Venus in whatever traditional system he may be using. Having attained a grade in one system, he has access to the equivalent grades of all of the systems of his tradition. In other words, you can use the Kabbalah as a central key to connect all other belief systems, right? So it doesn't matter what god or goddess you're working with, they're going to belong to one of the spheres on the tree. Mm-hmm. 11. But although he may use those other systems as occasion serves, experience proves that the Kabbalah supplies the best groundwork and the best system upon which to train a student before he begins to experiment with the pagan systems. The Kabbalah is essentially monotheistic. The potencies it classifies are always regarded as the messengers of God and not his fellow workers. This principle enforces the concept of a centralized government of the cosmos and of the grip of the divine law upon the whole of manifestation, a very necessary principle with which to imbue any student of the arcane forces. It is the purity, sanity, and clarity of the Kabbalistic concepts as resumed in the formula of the Tree of Life, which makes the glyph such an admirable one for the meditations that exalt consciousness and justify us and calling the Kabbalah of the yoga of the West. Okay, so listen, we're going to stop at that chapter and we're going to continue tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Oh, shit. Excuse me. So be ready. This is going to be extremely good. So be here. I'll be on time. 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to finish up chapters 3 and 4. And we will continue this every day if we got to. Not on Thursday, though, because that's a special class. All right. So I'm going to tap out now. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. Study well. This is going to get serious. All right. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. This is going to be the best year of your entire life. So stay confident. Stick with it. You got this. I mean every word I say. Peace.